He said, "You never surprise me anymore. Where's the romance?" I replied, "Fair criticism." Then I surprised him by having his stuff professionally packed while he was at brunch. The moving company's text confirmation was the romance he deserved. My name is Olivia Bennett. I'm 32 years old, and 6 weeks ago, I finally understood something that should have been obvious long before I was willing to admit it. 6 weeks ago, my boyfriend accused me of never making an effort. By the end of that day, his belongings were sitting in a storage unit. For almost 3 years, I thought Ethan and I had a solid relationship. Not perfect. Not some movie-worthy romance. Just real. The kind of relationship built on comfort, routine, and trust. At least that was what I believed. I met Ethan at a friend's birthday party when I was 30, and he was 29. He had the kind of charm that made conversations feel effortless. He could walk into a room full of strangers and somehow make every person feel like they were the most important one there. We talked for 4 straight hours that night. 3 months later, we were officially dating. A year after that, he was spending more nights at my condo than at his own place. The condo belonged to me. I had bought it before I ever met him, after years of saving, working overtime, and saying no to things I wanted because I was focused on something bigger. Every room represented a sacrifice I'd made. When Ethan started staying over more often, it felt natural. First came a toothbrush, then a few shirts, then a drawer, then another. Before I realized it, half of my closet belonged to him. I never minded. When you're building a future with someone, sharing space doesn't feel like losing anything. It feels like gaining something. For a long time, life was good. We traveled when we could, ordered takeout on lazy weekends, argued over movies neither of us really cared about, spent evenings stretched across the couch talking about work, family, and whatever random topic happened to come up. Nothing dramatic, nothing toxic, nothing that made me think I was watching a relationship slowly unravel. Looking back, that's probably why it took me so long to recognize what was happening. The change wasn't sudden. It happened so gradually that I barely noticed it. Somewhere along the way, Ethan stopped valuing comfort, stopped valuing stability, stopped valuing the small things that make a relationship feel safe. Instead, he started treating them like evidence that something was missing. The first moment that truly stands out happened about 6 weeks before everything ended. For months, Ethan had been talking about a popular Italian restaurant across town. The place was almost impossible to book. Every time reservations opened, they disappeared within minutes. He mentioned it constantly. The pasta, the wine list, the chef, the atmosphere. After hearing about it for nearly half a year, I finally managed to secure a reservation. It took reminders, alarms, and more persistence than I care to admit. When I got the confirmation email, I actually smiled at my phone. I was excited. Not because I cared about the restaurant, because I knew he did. I imagined how happy he'd be. I imagined seeing that look on his face when he realized I'd managed to get us a table. That evening started exactly the way I'd hoped. Soft lighting, fresh bread, the smell of garlic and wine drifting through the restaurant. Ethan looked great in the dark blue shirt he'd bought recently. For the first 20 minutes, everything felt normal, comfortable, familiar. Then, halfway through the appetizers, he set down his fork. "This is nice." I smiled. "I'm glad you like it." "It's nice." Something about the way he said it made me pause. The words sounded positive. The tone didn't. I tilted my head. "Okay." He leaned back in his chair. "You know what I miss?" I laughed softly. "Hopefully not me. I'm sitting right here." He didn't smile. "I miss being surprised." The comment caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" He gestured around the restaurant. "This." I looked around. "The restaurant you've been talking about for 6 months?" "Yeah." "And that's a bad thing?" "No." He sighed. One of those long theatrical sighs people use when they think they're explaining something obvious to someone who's somehow missing the point. "That's exactly what I'm talking about." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You plan everything." I stared at him. "I'm confused. You don't do spontaneous things anymore." For a second, I thought he was joking. Then I realized he wasn't. "Ethan, remember when we drove 3 hours to the beach because I randomly wanted seafood? That was 2 years ago." "So?" He shook his head. "You're predictable now." The word hit harder than it should have. Predictable. Not because it was particularly cruel, because I had spent weeks arranging a night that I genuinely believed would make him happy. Yet somehow, instead of appreciation, I was being criticized. "What exactly would you rather I do?" I asked. "I don't know." He shrugged. "Surprise me." I literally did. "No." He shook his head again. "You planned something." I waited for him to explain the difference. He couldn't, or maybe he didn't want to. The conversation went in circles for the rest of dinner. Not loud, not aggressive, just strange, like we were speaking different languages. When the check arrived, I paid without thinking. something I'd done many times before. The drive home wasn't much better. Ethan spent most of it texting. Every few minutes, his phone lit up. He'd smile, type something, laugh quietly, then go back to his screen. Eventually, I asked, "Who keeps making you laugh?" "Brianna." The answer came instantly, almost too instantly. I nodded. His best friend. Nothing unusual about that. At least that's what I told myself. Still, something small settled in the back of my mind. Not suspicion, not jealousy, just discomfort. The kind you immediately dismiss because you don't want to seem insecure. We went to bed without talking much. I assumed we'd both sleep on it and move on. Instead, things got worse. Over the next few weeks, Ethan developed a habit that slowly turned everyday life into something exhausting. The comments started small, then became constant. "Oh, wow." He'd glance around the condo. "Another exciting weekend at home." Or, "Takeout again?" Or, "We really know how to live dangerously." Everything came wrapped in a smile. Everything sounded like a joke. Yet none of it felt funny. I responded the way I always had. I tried harder. One Sunday, I brought him breakfast in bed. The eggs were apparently too soft. A few days later, I stopped by a florist on my way home from work and surprised him with flowers. He looked at them and said, "Gas station flowers?" They weren't. He never bothered checking. Another week, I organized a movie night with all his favorite snacks. He glanced at the setup. "We do this every week." After a while, I stopped feeling like I was doing thoughtful things for someone I loved. I felt like I was submitting little offerings to someone who had already decided to reject them. What bothered me wasn't the criticism itself. It was how automatic it had become, as though disappointment was now his default reaction to everything I did. Meanwhile, I kept making excuses for him. He's stressed. Work has been rough. Maybe something's bothering him. Maybe he's going through something he isn't talking about. The human brain is incredibly creative when it comes to protecting relationships we don't want to lose. Every explanation felt reasonable. Every excuse helped me avoid the possibility that something deeper was wrong. Then Monday arrived. The day everything finally shifted. I was working from home when Ethan appeared in the doorway of my office around noon. He looked unusually polished. Nice shirt. Expensive watch. Hair perfectly styled. I glanced up from my laptop. "Going somewhere?" He grinned. "Brunch. On a Monday?" "Brianna and some friends have the day off." "Sounds fun." He didn't leave. Instead, he stayed leaning against the doorframe. That should have been my first warning. People linger when they have something they want to say. "You know," he began. I looked up again. "What?" "Brianna's boyfriend surprised her last week." There it was. Another comparison. "Oh?" "He packed her bags." "Okay." "He drove her to the coast for the weekend." "That sounds nice." His smile disappeared. Then he looked directly at me and said the sentence that changed everything. "Must be nice having a partner who actually tries." The room went completely silent. Not the dramatic kind of silence people talk about in movies. The dangerous kind. The kind that arrives when a piece of your patience finally breaks. I stared at him. He stared back, waiting. Maybe for an argument. Maybe for an apology. Maybe for me to promise I'd do better. For weeks, I would have given him exactly that. For weeks, I would have immediately started wondering what I needed to fix. How I could improve? What more I could do? But something inside me was suddenly too tired to keep playing the game. So instead, I simply nodded. "Have fun at brunch." A flicker of confusion crossed his face. That wasn't the response he expected. For a moment, it looked like he might say something else. Then he pushed off the doorframe and left. A few seconds later, I heard the front door close. The condo became completely quiet. I stared at my computer screen. The cursor blinked. Minutes passed. 5, 10, maybe more. I don't really know. For weeks, I'd been trying to solve a problem, trying to become whatever version of myself Ethan seemed to want. More exciting, more spontaneous, more romantic, more something. And then a thought entered my mind. A simple thought. A terrifying thought. What if none of this had anything to do with me? What if I wasn't failing? What if Ethan had simply decided that nothing I did would ever be enough? I sat there staring into space as the realization slowly settled over me. Because there was something Ethan didn't know. Something I'd been planning for months. Hidden inside the bottom drawer of my desk was an envelope. Inside that envelope were plane tickets, a luxury resort reservation, private excursions, dinner bookings, spa appointments, an entire anniversary trip. The biggest surprise I'd ever planned in our relationship. Everything was already paid for. Everything was already arranged. Everything was waiting for next month. And the man who had just accused me of not trying had absolutely no idea it existed. I pulled the envelope from the drawer and stared at it. The weight of it felt different now. Heavier, sadder, because suddenly one question became impossible to ignore. If he genuinely believed I never made an effort, if he genuinely thought I didn't care, if months of planning could be erased by one brunch comparison, then what exactly was I still fighting for? And for the first time in nearly 3 years, I stopped wondering how to make Ethan happy. Instead, I found myself wondering what would happen if I stopped trying altogether. That thought didn't feel dramatic at first. It just sat there in the quiet room with me, calm and sharp, until I finally reached for the envelope again. The condo was silent, except for the faint hum of my laptop and the distant sound of traffic outside. Normally, when something upset me, I immediately started searching for a solution. That had become my role in the relationship. If Ethan was unhappy, I worked harder. If he felt neglected, I planned something thoughtful. If he complained about boredom, I found something new for us to do. For a long time, I thought that was love. Sitting there alone, I started wondering if it was actually exhaustion disguised as devotion. Because relationships require effort. Of course they do. But effort only works when both people are moving toward each other. Lately, I'd been the only one moving, the only one adjusting, the only one trying. Every memory from the past 6 weeks replayed in my head. The restaurant, the flowers, the movie night, the breakfast, the endless comments. Every single time I made an effort, Ethan somehow found a flaw in it. It felt like taking a test where the questions changed after you submitted your answers. And suddenly I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. A deep, bone-level tiredness that had been building for months. I opened the envelope again. Plane tickets, resort confirmation, excursions, reservations. Almost $2,500 spent on a surprise trip for a man who apparently believed I never surprised him. A laugh escaped before I could stop it. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. The entire situation was absurd. For weeks, I'd been listening to complaints about how little effort I made while secretly planning the biggest romantic gesture of our entire relationship. I slid everything back into the envelope. Then I made a decision. One simple decision. I wasn't going to spend another month begging someone to appreciate me. My hands felt strangely steady as I picked up my phone and called Trevor. Trevor owned a moving and storage company and had been one of my closest friends for years. He answered immediately. "What's up? I need to ask you something weird." His laugh came through the speaker. Those are usually my favorite questions. I took a breath. How quickly can your crew professionally pack someone's belongings? Silence. Then another second of silence. Finally, Trevor said, "Okay, that's specific." I explained the situation. Not every detail. Just enough. The constant criticism. The comparison to Brianna's boyfriend. The comment before brunch. The realization I'd had after Ethan walked out the door. When I finished, Trevor was quiet. "Olivia?" "Yeah?" "I think you've already made your decision." "I have." "You sure?" I looked around my office. The answer came easier than I expected. "I've never been more sure." A long exhale. Then Trevor said, "Give me 2 hours." The next call was Austin. An attorney. A close friend. And probably the most cautious person I'd ever met. If there was a legal problem hiding somewhere, Austin would find it. I explained everything. Then asked the question that mattered. "Can I remove Ethan's belongings from my condo?" Austin immediately started asking questions. Was Ethan on the deed? Number. The mortgage? Number. Utilities? Number. Lease? Number. Did he pay rent? Number. Did he have any ownership claim to the property whatsoever? Number. After a short pause, Austin finally said, "Document everything." "I will." "Photograph everything." "Okay." "Store everything safely." "Got it." "Give him access to retrieve it." "I can do that." Another pause. Then, "You're fine." That was all I needed. By 2 o'clock, Trevor's crew arrived. 3 movers, stacks of boxes, packing supplies, labels, clipboards. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. The crew moved through the condo with calm professionalism. No gossip, no judgment, no questions. They simply did their jobs. I showed them Ethan's things, his clothes, his gaming equipment, his office supplies, his shoes, his bathroom items, everything. Every box was labeled, every item photographed, every step documented. Trevor even joked that we now had enough paperwork to survive an IRS investigation. To my surprise, I wasn't crying. I wasn't falling apart. I wasn't second-guessing myself. In fact, something unexpected was happening. With every box that left the condo, I felt lighter. Not happier. Not yet. Just lighter. Like someone was removing a weight I'd been carrying for so long, I no longer noticed it. Around 4:30, Trevor walked over holding a framed photograph. Ethan and me, 2 years earlier. A beach trip. Sunburned faces. Huge smiles. The version of us I had spent months trying to get back. "You want this packed?" Trevor asked. I took the frame. For a moment, memories rushed through me. Road trips. Inside jokes. Late-night conversations. The people we used to be. Staring at that photo, a question hit me before I could stop it. I wasn't looking at the photo, wishing I could go back. I was looking at it, wondering when those people disappeared. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Pack it." By 5 o'clock, every trace of Ethan was gone. The condo felt different immediately. The condo felt cleaner, bigger, quieter, like it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for months. Trevor handed me the storage paperwork. Everything's secure. Thank you. You okay? I looked around, then surprised both of us with my answer. Actually, I think I am. After they left, I changed the locks. The old key would no longer work. The process took less than 20 minutes. 3 years had ended faster than installing a new deadbolt. Afterward, I sat on the couch staring at my phone. Only one thing remained. The message. How do you end nearly 3 years in a text? Carefully, I typed. Deleted. Typed again. Deleted again. Finally, I wrote, Ethan, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you said today. You're right, I haven't surprised you in a while. So here's a surprise. Your belongings have been professionally packed and placed in storage. Everything has been documented and is available for pickup. The storage information is below. Your key no longer works. We're done. I genuinely wish you the best. Take care of yourself. I read it twice, then pressed send. For 3 seconds, my heart hammered. Then something washed over me that I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Pure, overwhelming relief. I placed the phone face down on the counter and started making dinner. Halfway through cooking, I realized I was humming. Actually humming. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that. Hours later, I finally picked up my phone. The screen practically exploded. Missed calls, voicemails, texts, notifications. The number kept climbing. 20, 30, 40, 60, 73 missed calls. I stared at the screen, then laughed. Apparently, Ethan had borrowed phones from everyone at Brunch. Friends, co-workers, anyone willing to hand over a device. The messages ranged from furious to desperate. Answer your phone. Open the door. Call me immediately. You can't be serious. This isn't funny. Then I found one message that perfectly captured the entire situation. This is not the surprise I meant. I actually laughed out loud. Because somehow, after everything, that was still his focus. Not the breakup. Not the months of criticism. Not the fact that he'd spent weeks tearing down every effort I made. The surprise. I set the phone down. Saved screenshots of everything. Created the folder Austin recommended. Documented every call. Every voicemail. Every text. Then I turned the phone off. Got into bed. And slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up to a notification from my doorbell camera. Ethan had come home. And he hadn't come alone. The footage started around 9:30 the night before. There he was. Standing outside the building. Brianna beside him. 2 other women I didn't recognize nearby. Even without sound, I could tell exactly how the evening had gone. Ethan marched toward the door. Inserted his key. Nothing. Tried again. Nothing. Then froze. I watched the realization hit him in real time. The key wasn't broken. The lock wasn't damaged. I had meant every word. Seconds later, he started pounding on the door, gesturing wildly, pointing, yelling. Brianna appeared to be trying to calm him down. One of the women kept glancing around nervously, probably worried security would show up. The scene continued for nearly 20 minutes before they finally left. I sat on my couch drinking coffee while watching it. Strangely, I felt no guilt. A month earlier, I probably would have opened the door, tried to explain myself, tried to fix things, maybe even apologized. Now all I felt was certainty. Around 11 that morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello? The voice was instantly recognizable. Ethan's mother, Patricia. And she was already angry. Olivia, what is wrong with you? I closed my eyes. Of course. Good morning, Patricia. Don't good morning me. She was practically shouting. How could you do this to Ethan? I leaned back into the couch. We broke up. You don't throw someone away after 3 years. Interesting choice of words. Throw someone away. As if ending a relationship and enduring disrespect were somehow equivalent. His belongings are safe, I replied calmly. That's not the point. Then what's the point? He has nowhere to go. I nearly laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was ridiculous. Ethan had family, friends, co-workers, hotels, options, lots of options. He's a grown man. He's devastated. I had to set my coffee down before I said something I'd regret. I'd been devastated for weeks. Nobody seemed concerned about that. Patricia, I said carefully, for over a month, Ethan has repeatedly told me I wasn't good enough. At some point, I decided I deserved better. Silence. Then the response I expected. He didn't mean it. Of course. The universal excuse. He didn't mean it. He's stressed. He's emotional. He's struggling. Funny how those explanations always arrive after the damage is done. He said it, I replied. And that's what matters. Her voice sharpened. You're being cruel. No. I took a sip of coffee. I'm ending a relationship. The conversation deteriorated from there. Eventually, she hung up. I blocked Patricia's number. not out of anger, out of self-preservation. Brianna never contacted me again after that. Whether she finally understood what had happened or simply got tired of being caught in the middle, I never found out. Because deep down, I knew something. This wasn't over yet. And unfortunately, I was right. By the middle of the following week, the situation had shifted from frustrating to bizarre. I was in a routine meeting with my manager, Denise, when she opened the conversation with a sentence that immediately caught my attention. "I got a strange email this morning." Denise wasn't someone who wasted words. If she described something as strange, it was usually worth paying attention to. "What kind of strange email?" She hesitated. "Someone claiming to be concerned about your mental health." I nearly choked on my coffee. "My what?" "According to the email, you're experiencing some sort of emotional breakdown and may not be reliable at work for the foreseeable future." For a moment, I honestly thought she was joking. Then I realized she wasn't. The email was real. Anonymous. Sent from a burner account. No signature. No contact information. Just a long message implying I was unstable. Denise had already deleted it. She laughed after explaining the situation. "Whoever wrote it clearly doesn't know you." I rubbed my forehead. "I have a pretty good guess." That afternoon, I explained everything. The breakup. The 73 missed calls. The endless messages. The door camera footage. The harassment. By the time I finished, Denise looked equal parts amused and irritated. "So let me get this straight," she said. "Your ex spent weeks criticizing everything you did, got dumped, and now he's trying to convince people you're the unstable one? When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous." "It is ridiculous." Then her expression became serious. "Document everything. Already done. Every text. Every voicemail. Every screenshot. Every email. Everything was sitting inside the folder Austin told me to maintain." At the time, I still thought I was being overly cautious. I would eventually discover the opposite was true. A few days later, Trevor called. Ethan picked up his belongings. "How'd it go?" Trevor laughed. That answer alone told me everything. "Messy." Apparently, Ethan had arrived with Brianna and several friends. The entire time he was there, he kept asking questions. Was Olivia here? Did she leave a message? Had she said anything about him? Could Trevor pass something along? Could he arrange a meeting? Could he give Ethan my schedule? Trevor refused every request. Politely, professionally, firmly. When everything was loaded into the truck, Ethan signed paperwork confirming every item had been returned. Every box, every possession, every piece of property, fully accounted for. That should have ended the practical side of the breakup. It didn't. That evening, another message appeared from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Brianna." I sighed immediately. Of course it was. The message continued. "Ethan is devastated. He knows he made mistakes. Can you please just talk to him?" I stared at the screen. Not because I was tempted. Because I genuinely couldn't believe we were still having this conversation. For weeks, Ethan had criticized me, compared me to other people, dismissed every effort I made. Now suddenly everyone expected me to comfort him because consequences had arrived. I typed a response. Simple. Direct. "We're done." A reply arrived almost instantly. "You're being cold." I stared at that word. Cold. Funny how boundaries always seem cold to people who benefited from you having none. I didn't answer again. I blocked the number, then walked onto my balcony and stood there watching the evening settle across the city. The air felt lighter. For the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for criticism. I wasn't worried about disappointing someone. I wasn't calculating how to avoid another complaint. I was simply existing, and it felt incredible. Unfortunately, peace didn't last. The following Monday, an email arrived from a law office. The subject line made me laugh before I even opened it. Regarding a legal eviction. I immediately forwarded it to Austin. 10 minutes later, he called, laughing so hard he could barely speak. "Tell me that's fake." "Oh, it's real." He finally caught his breath. Then his voice shifted. "This isn't about housing." "What do you mean?" "This is about somebody who genuinely believed you'd never say no." I didn't answer him right away because, annoyingly, he was right. The condo wasn't the issue. The breakup wasn't even the issue anymore. The real problem was that Ethan still believed the story would end the way it always had. With me apologizing. With me fixing everything. With me finding a compromise. The problem was that a version of me no longer existed. Austin responded with the formal letter. Professional. Detailed. Thorough. It explained exactly why Ethan had no legal claim. No ownership. No tenancy. No property dispute. No unresolved issue whatsoever. A reasonable person would have stopped there. Ethan didn't. Instead, he started telling anyone willing to listen a completely different version of events. According to him, I had thrown him out without warning. Destroyed his property. Abandoned him financially. Left him homeless. At first, I was furious. Then, mutual friends started reaching out. And something interesting happened. Nobody who actually knew us believed him. Not one person. Every conversation followed the same pattern. They'd call. Ask what happened. I'd explain. Then they'd say some version of, "So Ethan spent weeks insulting you and got shocked when you left?" Exactly. Apparently, reality wasn't nearly as complicated as Ethan wanted it to be. A few days later, another piece of information surfaced. One of our mutual friends casually mentioned that Ethan had been rejected from several apartment applications. Why? His credit. I sat upright. What about it? She laughed awkwardly. Olivia, it's apparently awful. That explained more than I wanted it to. During our relationship, Ethan had always been vague about finances. Not suspicious, just vague. I later learned there was a reason. Credit card debt, late payments, collections notices, financial problems he'd never mentioned. Suddenly, a lot of things made sense. The reluctance to discuss money, the frustration about housing, the panic after losing access to my condo. Because it wasn't just about losing a relationship. It was about losing the stability he'd quietly depended on. Yet somehow, even that became my fault. Helen and I were never close, but she had always been the one person in Ethan's family who watched more than she spoke. At family gatherings, she didn't rush to defend anyone. She listened first. That was probably why her message felt different before I even opened it. We'd met once, years earlier, at a family barbecue. The message was simple. Patricia has been telling everyone her version of events, but parts of the story don't make sense. Would you be willing to tell me yours? I didn't realize how tense I'd been until I read that message. So I told her everything. The criticism, the comparisons, the restaurant, the anniversary trip he never knew about, the movers, the breakup, the harassment. When she finished reading it, her response stunned me. That sounds exactly like Ethan. I stared at the message, then read it again. Exactly like Ethan. Not a misunderstanding. Not out of character. Not surprising. Exactly like him. As we talked, Helen revealed something I never knew. Helen said Ethan had always been like this in relationships, just quietly enough that people missed it at first. He didn't explode right away. No matter what someone did for him, he somehow ended up focusing on what was missing instead. Over the years, several of Ethan's exes had vented to family members after breakups, and Helen had heard more than most. Helen said one girlfriend planned an entire birthday weekend for him. He spent most of the trip complaining about the hotel. Another rearranged her schedule to spend more time with him, and somehow that became proof she wasn't ambitious enough. Then, when the other person finally walked away, he acted blindsided. The more she talked, the more uncomfortable I became. Because she wasn't describing a stranger. She was describing my relationship. Finally, she sent a message that stayed with me. Some people confuse being loved with being accommodated. I sat staring at those words for a long time, because they explained everything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Ethan never seemed interested in fixing anything. Every problem just turned into a new reason to be disappointed. Something finally clicked into place. Not because he'd failed, because I finally understood that I hadn't. A week later, everything escalated. A text arrived from another unknown number. "I know where you work." My fingers went cold around the phone. It wasn't the first time he had crossed a boundary, but it was the first time the message felt less like begging and more like warning. That was it. No explanation. No signature. Nothing. The message made my stomach tighten. Not scared, but concerned. Because the line between desperate and reckless is often thinner than people realize. I immediately sent the screenshot to Austin. His response came within minutes. "Call me." The moment he answered, I could hear the change in his voice. He wasn't laughing anymore. He wasn't amused anymore. He was concerned. "Save everything." "Already have." "Good." A pause. Then, "I think it's time we stop treating this like breakup drama." I knew exactly what he meant. This wasn't about reconciliation anymore. This wasn't about closure. This wasn't about a relationship. It had become harassment. And every new message was creating more evidence. By that point, none of it looked isolated anymore. The texts, the appearances, the legal threats, the constant attempts to reach me all pointed to the same problem. A few weeks later, after Austin had gathered every screenshot, voicemail, burner number text, workplace report, storage receipt, signed pickup document, and email trail into one file, it finally reached a judge. The hearing itself lasted less than 20 minutes. Austin handled everything. I wasn't even there. By lunchtime, my phone rang. "It's done," he said. "That's it?" "That's it." The judge reviewed the evidence. Months of messages, workplace incidents, legal threats, and repeated attempts to contact me despite being told not to. Then the judge asked a question that completely destroyed Ethan's argument. What unresolved issue remains between these two people? There wasn't one. No shared property. No legal dispute. No financial obligation. Nothing. The relationship had ended. The communication was unwanted. Case closed. A 6-month no-contact order was granted. No messages. No phone calls. No third-party communication. No approaching my workplace. No approaching my condo. No more excuses. No more loopholes. Just a boundary backed by law. When Austin finished explaining everything, I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt relieved, because winning implies there was a competition. This never felt like a competition. It felt like finally setting down something heavy. Over the next few months, life slowly returned to normal. Actually, better than normal. I received a promotion at work. The condo felt like mine again. I repainted rooms, bought furniture I actually liked, removed things I'd only kept because Ethan preferred them. The space changed. Then I changed with it. One morning, I was sitting on my balcony with coffee when I noticed something strange. I wasn't waiting for criticism anymore. Nobody was telling me the coffee was wrong. The weather wasn't exciting enough. The weekend plans were boring. The silence felt different now. Peaceful, comfortable, healthy. Eventually, I started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Just conversations. Coffee dates. Getting to know people. Learning what it felt like to connect with someone without constantly defending yourself. One day, someone asked about my last relationship. I gave the short version. He kept telling me I wasn't romantic enough. She laughed. What happened? I smiled. I surprised him. That answer made her laugh even harder. But later, after I thought about it, I realized something. The story was never really about revenge. It wasn't about movers. It wasn't about lawyers. It wasn't even about Ethan. It was about self-respect. About recognizing the moment when you're constantly proving your worth to someone who has already decided not to see it. Helen told me Patricia didn't snap all at once. It happened slowly. At first, she defended Ethan out of habit. Then she started living with the version of him I had been living with for months. The complaints, the blame, the helplessness, the way every solution became another problem. By the time she finally told him he needed to figure things out himself, she didn't sound angry anymore. She sounded exhausted. The final update came from Helen months later. Apparently, Ethan was dating someone new. The message took less than a minute to read. When I finished, I felt absolutely nothing. There was no anger left, no jealousy, not even curiosity, just a strange emptiness that felt a lot like peace. And that surprised me more than anything else, because it meant I was truly finished. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't trying to convince myself. I was simply finished. Sometimes I still think about that restaurant, that dinner, that conversation. At the time, I thought Ethan wanted romance. Now I think he wanted something impossible. He wanted to feel special all the time, and no amount of love ever seemed capable of filling that gap. Looking back, I don't think the relationship ended the day I changed the locks. It ended much earlier, when I became responsible for both people's happiness. In the end, none of the dramatic parts mattered as much as I thought they would. Not the trip, not the movers, not even the court order. What stayed with me was how peaceful life became once I stopped trying to earn affection from someone determined not to give it. The condo is quiet now. My career is thriving. My future feels open again. And somewhere out there, Ethan may still be telling people I blindsided him. Maybe he even believes it. That's his story. This is mine.